Well, another game for Toronto FC on the road, another draw for Toronto FC on the road. That takes TFC's draw streak away from BMO Field at 3 games right now. Denver against the Colorado Rapids, of course Los Angeles against the Galaxy last weekend, and now in Boston against the New England Revolution. TFC that manages to get 3 points away from home, 3 points that may be absolutely precious as this season actually goes on. The game ended, of course, last night 0-0. TFC playing, of course, in Boston in front of what I think is probably going to go down as one of the smallest crowds in Major League Soccer history. I think everybody in Boston was peacefully, unlike in Vancouver, they were peacefully watching the Stanley Cup final last night, and congratulations to fellow Newfoundlander Michael Ryder, who's going to be the second person from my home province to get his name on the Stanley Cup. So congratulations to the Pride of Bonavista. By the way, hi, I'm Tim Drodge, and this is View from the South Stands. It's really nice to have you guys here with me today. Another interesting game for Toronto FC. Again, on the surface, you look at a 0-0, you don't think it's going to be very interesting, but there was a lot of interesting things happening last night in that game, and a few players in particular stood out for me. Alan Gordon makes Toronto FC almost single-handedly, in my humble opinion, a very different team. He gives them a real offensive threat that, frankly, the club hasn't had in his absence. He reminds me a lot of the way Danny Dichio used to play when in his days here in Toronto. A prototype holding up the ball center forward who can make something out of almost nothing. Good in the air, intimidating the center backs, creates a lot of space for midfielders and strikers around him. And I think Gordon actually was again the man of the match last night, and that's 2 games in a row. 2 goals, of course, away in Los Angeles, and he very easily could have had 1 or even 2 last night against the New England Revolution. There were a couple of early corners conceded by TFC last night. The first real chance for the club, according to my notes, were in like the 16th minute. Borman had a long ball into Gordon, who holds it, who finds Plata in space doing a run, who puts a nice ball on net, and Matt Reese made the save. It was really interesting with the tiny, minuscule crowd at Gillette Stadium last night. Again, one of the smallest, I'd argue, in MLS history. It was absolutely fascinating on the broadcast hearing the players yelling at each other, particularly Stefan Fry. I think in the 22nd minute there was a Urosowski foul. The Revs got a free kick just at the top of the box, and it was absolutely fascinating hearing Fry yelling at the players, yelling at Eckersley to get into the wall, yelling at players to make sure men were marked and covered that weren't in the wall, and so on. It was really interesting to actually hear, because you never hear it at BMO Field with the noise, and you never hear it almost anywhere else in Major League Soccer, because the crowds are a lot better than what we saw on Wednesday. Hearing him actually step up and actually be as dominant a force and a leader on the pitch that we all probably suspected him to be going in. TFC had a really nice chance as well in the 36th minute. Off their 4th corner of the half, TFC had a ball cleared off the line. It was really the best chance of the half. The ball came in, of course, off of Alan Gordon's head. Go figure, man of the match. Things didn't really kick off until in the second half, until like the 51st minute, with Fry making a wonderful save off a 30-yard free kick in the 51st minute. We had Corden coming on from Icon Santos in the 57th minute. Bit of a head-scratcher for me. Corden, of course, is a midfielder. Maicon, the team captain, playing as a striker. Maybe, of course, Vinter is looking towards Saturday against Seattle, which I'll get to in a minute. But again, it was a bit of a head-scratcher to me. A lot of the fans on the message boards last night, speaking of head-scratchers, were actually really questioning a lot of Vinter's tactical substitutions in the second half. In particular, bringing on Gianluca Zavarisi for Urosowski in the 68th minute, who in 22 minutes on the pitch gets a yellow card for encroaching on a free kick, and then a pretty rough foul in injury time that sees TFC have to actually kill off the game a man down under a lot of unnecessary pressure that his sending off with a reckless play wouldn't have actually brought in. I thought Urosowski, again, he was tackled roughly a couple of times, but Urosowski, who Zamorisi was subbed for, in my opinion, looked quite good. And bringing, again, Martina on for Plata was the third substitution, which, again, looked like a bit of a downgrade to me. Again, I'm not sure if Winter was looking towards Saturday or not. I'm not going to really be as critical of those substitutions as maybe a lot of the fans on the message boards are being right now. Because, again, Winter sees these guys every day, folks. We don't. I get the training once in a blue moon. I get to see what's going on just a little bit behind the scenes. And I am far and away not the most connected person at that club. There's journalists that are there at every single game and every single training and every single practice that see a lot more than I do. And even those guys aren't often really fully in the loop when it comes to, the day-to-day machinations inside that locker room. Relatively, one nice little stat for TFC last night, and again, a concerning stat at the same time, was corner kicks. TFC actually earned 7 corner kicks yesterday, which is on the high side for TFC. They conceded 11, which again I think speaks to some of the struggles that TFC consistently has at fullback and center back. Borman is a bit of a wanderer, a bit of a roamer. He's often found out of position because he's trying to pinch up offensively, and we don't have either the midfielder or one of the center backs slotting in behind him as much as we probably should. And I think that leads to a lot of corners that TFC unnecessarily concedes because the center backs are just, panicking to get the ball out wide and away from danger. TFC leads the league in conceding corners, and they're last in the league in earning them, and that's something that's been that way for the last 3 years, as a matter of fact. Dwayne Rollins at the end of the game, my good friend who writes for Canadian Soccer News over at the 24th Minute, tweeted just that the game was over that when adjusted for home and away, if you extrapolate the percentage of points that TFC is getting on the road and extrapolate what they're getting as a percentage at home and try to figure out where the points are, says that TFC are now on pace for 31 points. Yes, that's a concerning number, and yes, TFC is on the outside looking in. And it's still not good enough for the playoffs, but things are improving. 3 away games in a row where TFC has actually gotten a result and gotten points on the road is progress. Having Alan Gordon back in the lineup is progress. Seeing Donnell Henry, the 18-year-old academy graduate, step in last night for Nana Adekora and Adrian Can and all of the other injured defenders, and have a relatively good game is progress. They've got a couple of tough games coming up right now in the next week. They've got Seattle at home on Saturday, which I'll get back to in a second. Then they've got to go to Rio Tinto, arguably the roughest place to play in all of MLS, and play Real Salt Lake away. Then it's back at home for the 2-game set, one in MLS and one, of course, for the rescheduled Voyageurs Cup final against the equally struggling Vancouver Whitecaps. So a really critical point coming up right now at home. We're 2 tough home games and 1 tough away game. So we'll see basically what happens between now and then. Now, the last 3 away games, as I mentioned a moment ago, have been draws. I think that's really a good omen. I think if you go back and look at all 3 games, whether it be the Colorado game, whether it be the Los Angeles game, or whether it be the game yesterday on Wednesday versus New England, I think in all 3 games, yes, TFC did have their travails and their troubles, but I think in all 3 games, they showed a level of organization, a level of comfort, and a level of belief in themselves, especially in the game in Los Angeles, where not only were draws well earned, but I think it was almost a bit of an injustice that TFC didn't get 1 or maybe even 2 wins out of those 3 road games. So again, I think there's some progress being made, and I think with all due respect to Dwayne, I think it's a little early yet, as I wrote in my piece earlier this week about the myth of the MLS home field advantage being not as strong as maybe people are thinking it usually is with all those draws. Yes, teams are getting results at home. I think 81% of the time they're getting results, but about 40% of those results are ties. So there's still points to be had on the road, and there's still wins to be had on the road as well. So that's it. I think Donnell Henry stood out for me. I think Stephen Fry, of course, stood out for me, and most importantly, I think Alan Gordon stood out for me as well. Saturday, the Seattle game, I've actually, am honored to say that I've been asked by TFC to actually write another piece for the game day program where I actually document a recent experience I had as part of the Support Local Soccer campaign to actually go to a Toronto FC Academy game at Lamport Stadium. I hope you get a chance to actually get out and actually pick up a copy and take a look at that. Speaking of the Academy, they play Friday evening at Lamport. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to make it due to a previous commitment, but I am planning on going to the game on July 2nd, of course, at Lamport Stadium as well, which should be a lot of fun. Thanks again for watching. Your comments and criticisms, good or bad, are always appreciated. And I'll have another video blog up on the weekend, of course, after the game versus Seattle on Saturday. Thanks again for watching, and you folks have yourself a really good day. Cheers.